Hey everyone, it's Ricky Molina from the Ricky Molina YouTube channel. Glad you could be with me today. So today we're going to be talking about the whole issue of doing cover songs as an artist. So let's say you wanted to do a recording of a song that you did not write and it belongs to somebody else. And whether it's another songwriter and or publishing company. In this case, there are several things you need to keep in mind. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And at the end of the video, I'm going to also suggest some points that perhaps the big institutions, the big publishers, and social media companies can keep in mind so that we can all benefit from a system that basically is encouraging cultural diversity and appreciation of art and music in general. I'd like to just mention a disclaimer at this point that the comments in this video are based on my own understanding and interpretation of the copyright and fair use laws in the United States particularly. I'm not going to be delving into any of the international copyright laws, but that would be something for someone else or another video someday perhaps. The comments and opinions that I make in this video should not be construed as legal advice directly, despite the fact that I've done quite a bit of research on this subject and have accumulated a lot of points and tips over the years from having taken courses related to business marketing and music promotion in particular. I am not a legal professional and therefore strongly suggest that you do your own research as well, online or in books. And also if you're an up-and-coming recording artist, I strongly encourage you to hire legal counsel who specializes in copyright law if necessary. So I'd just like to say that, on my YouTube channel, the Ricky Molina YouTube channel, I've got a lot of educational music videos. I've got quite a few of my own compositions as well, and product reviews. And recently I've written a song which is actually a derivative piece, an excerpt from another artist from the 1970s, and I'm basically copying an arpeggio guitar part that would serve very well as an introduction into my derivative piece. But in order to do that, I'd have to be mindful of copyright laws because some of the music isn't mine. But as I began contemplating, using an excerpt from someone else's music, I began to worry about this whole concept of getting YouTube blocks and censorships from YouTube particularly because I wanted to do a music video with myself playing the piece. And you come across some of these videos like from Rick Beato, for example, who has a YouTube channel for music education, and you can learn quite a bit from Rick. There's a lot of stuff here about chord formations and progressions and the music theory and composition, recording, mixing, all sorts of things. So you can learn a ton from a guy like Rick Beato, or for example, from a guy like Paul Davids, who has a YouTube channel that specializes in guitar instrumentals, how to play certain guitar parts from some popular songs in the rock and pop music scene. So you could pick up some really interesting tips, and as a guitarist, I find that quite interesting. But it's interesting to note that even though Paul Davids is from Holland and is European, his videos were also subject to the YouTube blocks that he was basically facing from UMG, Universal Music Group, and WMG, Warner Music Group. And then you got a host of other YouTube channels out there that have been voicing their frustrations because UMG, WMG, and EMI have been forcing YouTube to basically slap these videos down. So these YouTube channels lose all their credit and monetization, for example. And of course, the viewership numbers go down in the process as well. Some have really ranted and complained quite heavily about these slaps on the wrist, so to speak, from YouTube. And then you even have some educational sites like greatcourses.com, Professor Robert Greenberg, who is a good source for orchestral and classical music. And at the end of his course entitled The 30 Greatest Orchestral Works, for example, Professor Robert Greenberg basically voices his frustrations about censorship laws and copyright regulations that have basically prevented him from covering or doing some classes on some of the more contemporary artists like Bela Bartok, for example. Bartok is no longer alive, of course, but his estate is in charge of his scores and of his music and his publications, and they are forbidding anyone from basically touching and coming near Bartok's music. which is a shame because, all people like Professor Greenberg are doing are basically trying to get into the modus operandi of these composers and how the music works, and from a music theory perspective as well. So a lot of what could have been very, very fascinating, inspiring, and educational information is not materializing due to these censorship and copyright blocks. So it's quite a pity. What I've also found disconcerting is what appears to be an inconsistency of policy being employed by YouTube in particular. I mean, there's certain YouTube channels out there that are being blocked. Some of them are really quite innocent, in my opinion, sharing educational information and trying to broaden a cultural appreciation for music. And others appear to be getting away scot-free. Take a YouTube channel like Cover Nation, for example, where you have, for example, these titles are misleading because it's not Shania Twain singing You're Still the One, or Ava Max, So Am I, Bruno Mars. These aren't the original artists, and yet they have titles that are giving us the impression as though these are the original artists, and they happen to be cover songs as well. So how are these YouTube channels getting away with using other people's music? I mean, why are some songs blocked and others not? Is it because some of the songs that are blocked belong to UMG, WMG, or EMI? Or if they're getting away with using cover songs, is it because the channel or video hasn't surpassed certain specific viewership or subscription hurdles? What is more likely the case for YouTube videos particularly, these YouTube creators are probably buying a combination of mechanical and or sync licenses. Before we move on to discussing what mechanical and sync licenses are all about, I'd like to just forewarn you. There are a bunch of YouTube videos out there that are trying to show you how to bypass the copyright laws and, by filing disputes, for example, with YouTube and with the publishing companies. And I just think you got to be really, really careful with this. I don't find this to be a solution at all, because what do you think is going to happen if YouTube notices that you're continuously filing disputes for every single cover song video that you're uploading? More than likely that if you keep filing disputes, YouTube is just going to shut your channel down completely. So you got to be careful. Some of these solutions are probably not legit. After doing extensive research, many months and years of accumulating information regarding copyright laws, I find that there are very few reliable sources regarding copyright blocks and regulations in the United States, let alone internationally. And it's difficult to enforce copyright law on a global scale these days. We really need to keep on top of developments in the industry and pay attention to what has transpired to certain artists directly regarding sync and mechanical licensing and copyright protection. And we should take precautions whenever possible and know what the rules are before we're going to play the game. Otherwise, it's probably best to avoid trying to cover copyrighted material. Getting back to some of these channels that do cover songs, quite a few YouTube channels come to mind. I tried contacting these YouTube creators directly by leaving comments below some of their videos, or if they have a contact messaging system on their websites, for example. I tried sending a bunch of these YouTube creators who do cover music, asking them for some feedback and response on this whole concept of copyright law and what are they doing? Are they getting mechanical licenses? Are they getting sync licenses for video productions? And I found it very interesting that none of these artists got back to me directly. It's almost as if they just totally want to avoid, talking about this or getting in trouble. Maybe they fear that I'm working for the authorities or something. And it's not the case at all. I'm an independent artist myself, a creator, and I got to know what I'm getting into before I touch a cover song. I want to do the right thing, and I want to hear from these guys who are doing tons of cover songs. What are they doing to abide by the law and to play by the rules? Well, here's where I can share with you some of the things I've learned over the months and years that I've been looking into this subject. And some of these may help you out because you're not going to find a lawyer who's going to go out there and share this information with you directly. Lawyers work like this. If you want their services, you got to pay them. And, there's nothing out there, so general information, unless you purchase a book written by a legal counsel. So basically, I'm going to try to summarize some of the key points here that you should keep in mind as an indie artist, up-and-coming YouTube creator, doing cover songs or using excerpts from cover songs. Now, one of the key points you should keep in mind is that there's something called public domain. So any published work that is pre-1922 requires no copyright licenses. You can take an old song from the 20s or from the classical Baroque period. Do your own performance of it. Do your own arrangement, as long as it's not copying somebody else's arrangement of that music, and you're fine. But the closer you get to 1922, like 1920, 1921, 22, 23 even, around there, you really have to do some extra research just to make sure it is truly public domain. Because there may be some, plus or minus years of official publication, copyright registration, all of this. But generally speaking, anything before 1922, and you're good to go. Just be mindful, however, that you may still be liable for copying an arrangement of a work that is in the public domain. So basically, try to come up with your own version of public domain work if possible. Okay, let's review some common types of licenses needed if you want to produce music that is not your own. Okay, the first category that you need to know about is what is known as mechanical licenses. This has to do with audio only. And you would be pleased to know that everyone here is entitled to getting a mechanical license to cover previously copyrighted music. No one can stop you from recording and uploading for sale your version of a cover song unless it is totally out of left field. I mean, if you try to do a version of, let's say, a Police song, Every Breath You Take, and it has totally no relation, it doesn't have the same spirit or vibe of the original song, and it's like way off, and the publisher is not happy with that, you may not be able to get the mechanical license. But generally speaking, mechanical licenses are there for everybody. You have a right to do your own version of a cover song. And you need that mechanical license for streaming services, for vinyl, LPs, CDs, cassettes, or downloading. Okay, and this is Section 115 of the Copyright Act from 1976. So it includes downloads. Okay, now there are two different types of mechanical licenses. There's standard and limited. Now, standard mechanical licenses when you anticipate having more than 500 downloads or sales of your version of the song. And limited is also mechanical license, but you're expecting to sell less than 500 downloads, for example. And you have to buy these in chunks. You have to buy like a buffer amount, what they call a buffer amount of anticipated sales. So that's mechanical, the audio part. When it comes to producing a music video, or if your music is going to be used in a film, TV, a commercial, or a video game, then you'll need to get a sync license. Now, we'll get to YouTube videos in a second, but bear with me. And I'm talking for generally non-YouTube here, videos, film, TV, video games, and commercials. So you're going to be doing a cover song that's going to go into a commercial, say, or your version of an original famous pop song, let's say from the 70s or 80s. Well, you're going to need a sync license for that. And sync stands for synchronization license. Now, YouTube is a special situation, and like I said, I'll get to it in a moment. Now, if you plan to change the lyrics around a lot and or the melody and maybe the chord progression, maybe going to use different types of chords to give it more of a jazz feel or some sort of extension chords that are going to change the sound a little bit, well, then you're changing the song. You'd need an interpolation license for this. These are probably more expensive than a sync license or a mechanical license. Custom licenses, because they're custom tailored to your specific needs, is going to be more expensive as well. We're talking potentially a couple hundreds of dollars in certain cases. Now, it's good to know that the fee for mechanical licenses are pretty reasonable. They're only $12 a year, $1 a month at DistroKid, for example. But you also have to pay the royalties. If you're going to sell, let's say for every download that you sell, you're going to have to pay about 9 cents per download. So if you sell 100 copies or 100 downloads of a cover song that you've made, that'll be $9 in royalties, in addition to the $1 a month fee that DistroKid will charge you going forward. If you sell 1,000 downloads, that'll be $90 that you'll have to pay through your licensing agent, in this case DistroKid, plus the $1 a month fee from DistroKid for the mechanical license. Now, once again, you are entitled to getting a mechanical license. Sync licenses are not always guaranteed. The publisher and or the songwriter could not be happy with the way you've interpreted their music and don't like your music video or don't like how it's going to be used in film and TV. In which case they could step in and say, I'm sorry, we're not going to give you a sync license. That's not the case with mechanical licenses. They have to give you a mechanical license. So for video, it's a little bit more complicated and there are certain rules and such, but you can still buy sync licenses for about $15 plus the ad revenues from the videos, for example, or royalties that are generated in the case of film and TV. Now, the two organizations that I recommend for sync fees, this is just based on my research. You may want to continue to do your own as well. You may find other licensing agencies out there that do just as good, if not better, a job. But the two that I found based on customer support, feedback, and policies and plans are affordablesonglicensing.com and TuneCore. TuneCore owns a subsidiary called tunelicensing.com. And TuneCore is a really well-established outfit. You can't go wrong, but they're not the cheapest, okay? So it may be higher than the $15 license that I'm referring here for the sync fees. I mentioned that in some cases, the powers that be may not permit you to get a sync license because they don't like the way you've interpreted their music in a video format. And there's that famous case comes to mind with Prince when he didn't like a video of a little kid dancing to one of his hits. So he forced YouTube to make the creators take it down. There have been other examples of this by bands like the Eagles and Metallica, for example. You know, forced takedowns because they did not approve of the videos doing cover songs of the music that they wrote. Taylor Swift also comes to mind, very tight on her copyrights. But I think more relevant to most of you YouTubers out there who are doing YouTube videos are the takedowns that are being forced on YouTube by Universal Music Group, UMG, and Warner Music Group. I'd just like to mention that YouTube is kind of stuck in the middle of this. You know, they're on the side of the indie artists and the video creators who are uploading all this great music online onto YouTube. But at the same time, they have to respect and honor the interests of the publishers in the United States. Okay, so we covered the essentials here. We covered mechanical licenses and sync licenses. There's another license that you should be aware of as well. Let's say if you have a business and you have a retail store or a coffee shop and you're playing music in the background, well, you have to get licensed for the music that you play in your shop. Okay, and these are business marketing licenses, and they usually run for about $59 a month or $60 a month or something. And you can get them from companies like Soundtrack.com and Greenlight. Soundtrack offers a deal that's actually a little cheaper than Greenlight. It's about $27 a month where you can schedule your own music and create your own soundtracks or playlists. You can even turn Spotify playlists into soundtracks, and basically so that you can play music in the background in your store, or even for business marketing events, for example. Greenlight is more of a sophisticated, high-scale business licensing outfit for film and TV purposes, as well as for business marketing purposes. ASCAP also offers this type of service for businesses who need to register and get permission to play background music. But I found that this particular service is much more expensive than Soundtrack.com. So do you need a sync license if you upload a music video on YouTube where you're covering a song or using excerpts from copyrighted material? Well, you'd be happy to know that YouTube has a blanket sync license deal with about 97 to 98% of the publishers out there, obviously not including WMG or UMG. So most of the time, video creators who do covers on YouTube don't need to get a sync license. That's not the case if you go outside of YouTube. If you're doing a film or TV or commercial or video game, you're going to need that sync fee license. But for YouTube, that's not WMG or UMG material, you're good to go, basically. I mean, there may be some gray areas that are going to pop up in the future, in which case you're just going to have to feel it out, and you'll get notified for sure by YouTube if you are violating policy. But YouTube has a content ID system in place that automatically identifies whether you're using copyrighted material or not. In which case, if it does determine that you're using copyrighted material, it'll ask you to check a box acknowledging that it's copyrighted material. And then you're pretty much good to go, unless it's WMG or UMG or some other nebulous publishing company that may be included in a list. But you'll get a predetermined split of the ad revs in this case. Most of them are going to go to the publisher and songwriter, and then YouTube. So whatever's left, you'll probably get in the form of ad revs. If you're unsure of how much ad revenue percentage you're entitled to for your music video, you actually can check out the YouTube Video Manager, which will walk you through a series of steps and show you what the breakdowns are in terms of the ad revenue percentages. And there's also a YouTube monetization troubleshooter that'll help you answer some of these questions as well. Having said that, I think it's fair to say it's not your song to begin with. You're basically tapping somebody else's creative inspiration for profitable purposes. So you should be even grateful that you're getting away with not having to buy a sync license for a music video on YouTube. No sync license is generally required in most cases, but you obviously don't want to be in a position where your YouTube videos are going to get repeatedly blocked. So you have to do your research and find out who the publisher and songwriters are of the songs that you're covering. Because if you keep getting blocked, what do you think is going to happen to your YouTube channel? You're going to get shut down. So you have to be very mindful if you're playing this game of doing cover songs, how far you can push the limits in what has become today a very nebulous state of affairs. And just to reiterate, for non-YouTube sync productions, you will need to get a sync license for videos, films, TV shows, commercials, and video games that incorporate cover songs. And I suggest contacting such agencies as Affordable Song Licensing, TuneCore, or EasySongLicensing.com. And there's some artists out there who mainly do cover songs. That's what they do to get noticed and to get their fan base going. You could probably name a few right at the top of your head. But there are music supervisors out there and music libraries and catalogs that really like some of these derivations or variations of pop songs. Some of these cover versions are really quite outstanding, and they may do a better job fitting the film or TV part without having to pay the exorbitant performance royalties on the original version. Now, if you're an artist who specializes in doing cover songs, you should make it your business to get mechanical licenses for each and every song for clearance purposes. Because if that song is going to go into a film or TV or commercial, it's got to be cleared. What happens with supervisors and music editors at these large film institutions is they will not like to work with you anymore going forward if they experience legal difficulties with the clearances of the songs you're covering. So it's your job as a cover song artist, if that's your biz, definitely get those mechanical licenses in place. First and foremost, before you upload to music libraries or send it to the music supervisors or music editors. And those music libraries and catalogs include such of the institutions that I'm listing here, bottom right part of the screen. Now, some of these music libraries and catalogs do a very good job promoting the music inside their inventory, and they will be contacting music supervisors and editors. And actually, those music supervisors and editors love to work with music libraries sometimes and catalogs, because these libraries and catalogs have done a great job usually making sure the music is cleared of all the rights. Therefore, that's another good reason to get those mechanical licenses in place for all the songs that you cover yourself before you ship it on to either a music supervisor or to the music libraries. As mentioned, it'd be probably a good idea that you check out copyright.gov for a lot of the details here. Some of these legal terms may be a little bit confusing to you, but it's a great place to start to becoming familiar with copyright law in the United States. On an international level, and it makes sense these days because our music, that spans the web and social media, is everybody has access to it in different parts of the world. It makes sense to have some sort of an international copyright registration. And the service that I happen to use is safecreative.org. It has been known to be the leading copyright registry on the net. Now, it's also important if you're in the United States to register your music with your PRO, Performance Rights Organization, like ASCAP or BMI or CSAC. Now, this has to do with original compositions here, not for covers. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of these YouTube creators out there and channels, and they think they have this superb understanding of the meaning of fair use. But I have to caution you that the term fair use is not so easily understood. Just because you think you read Section 107 and you understand the gist of it doesn't necessarily mean that when you use a cover song in whatever video you're making, that it's for educational purposes, particularly, that it happens to be fair use. So what is fair use? Again, it's not necessarily so black and white. According to copyright.gov, fair use is a legal doctrine that promotes freedom of expression by permitting the unlicensed use of copyright-protected works in certain circumstances. Section 107 of the Copyright Act provides the statutory framework for determining whether something is a fair use and identifies certain types of uses, mind you, such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research as examples of activities that may qualify as fair use. May qualify as fair use. Section 107 calls for consideration of the following 4 factors in evaluating a question of fair use. So you can see, 1, purpose. Is your use of copyrighted material for commercial or non-commercial, for-profit or non-profit purposes? As you may guess, if it's for non-commercial, non-profit purposes, that's one check mark in your favor. And if it's for commercial and for-profit, then it's probably a check against you. 2, whether the use of copyrighted material is related to the nature of creative expression. Fiction versus factual. Is this version of the cover song in the same general spirit and tone and motivation and inspiration of the original copyrighted work? That's pretty tough to identify. Different people have different interpretations of what the nature of a creative expression is. 3, the degree and substantiality of the copied work relative to the original. How much of the original work are you using? Are you using only a wee bit of it, maybe an introductory arpeggio or a chord progression? Or is it the chorus part? Is it the heart and soul of the song that you're copying? Or is it the entire song? That also affects whether your use of copyrighted material is fair use. And point 4, whether the copied use affects or tarnishes the value of the original copyrighted work. You know, obviously, if you're going to do a version of a song that is so bad or so disrespectful of the original intent of the songwriter and publisher, you may run into problems with fair use. So in summary, don't assume that because you've identified some of the terms of fair use policy that you're in the clear. Okay, so I put together this slide here that basically summarizes the business side of things, where you're going to need bulk licenses for playlists and things like that, and on a song-by-song, case-by-case basis. If you're going to do if you're doing a cover song on a case-by-case basis, you're going to need a mechanical license for selling downloads of your version of the song. In which case, I would suggest looking at DistroKid or affordable song licensing as options. If it's going to be YouTube, you probably don't need a sync license because YouTube has you covered and in the blanket sync license deals that it has with publishers. If it's non-YouTube video, film, TV, commercials, video games, you're going to need a sync license. And you probably want to check out, once again, affordable song licensing, TuneCore. Now I have Harry Fox here listed also because they're such a big agency, and but I found in practice that they're very hard to get a hold of. It's such a huge institution. They're probably not going to help out or give you the time of day. At least that has been my experience. I've had difficulty communicating with them. Whereas with affordable song licensing, they will get back to you in a day or two and answer your questions. They even called me up. Easy Song Licensing, also very easy to talk to. Get on the phone, but their pricing may be a little bit tricky, so you got to do your research. TuneCore, I think, is a very well-respected, established organization. They own tunelicensing.com as well. So if you're a bigger artist, you probably want to check out TuneCore, where the prices may be a little bit higher, but you'll get all the attention you could possibly imagine. Now, on the business side of things, regarding playlists for your shop or your retail outfit, you want to play that music constantly from playlists in the background, I suggest checking out Soundtrack, ASCAP, and Greenlight. When you do get a mechanical license, whether it's DistroKid, Affordable Song Licensing, or EasySongLicensing.com, TuneCore, you want to get proof of licensing. So ask them to email you a copy of it with, maybe a PDF version, and of course save it in your archives. So just to review, for the project that I was talking about earlier in the video, I wanted to do an excerpt, 2 guitar progressions from an early Genesis song. And I want to do a YouTube video. I want to also perhaps sell some copies of my version of this song plus my derivative work. Okay, so I'm going to append my derivative work to the excerpted Genesis part, which is about 10% of the song would be Genesis and 90% of it would be my original work. So I'd like to sell that as one whole big download. For that, I'm going to need a mechanical license, which will run me about anywhere from $12 a year to $15 a year, plus the royalty payments per sale of 9 cents per download. But since I'm going to be uploading it to YouTube, I do not need a sync license because YouTube has this blanket sync license deal with about 97 to 98% of the publishers out there. By the way, here is a mechanical royalty payout schedule for you that shows that, generally speaking, based on the number of copies that you sell, downloads that you sell, you have to pay an increasing amount in mechanical royalties to the publishers. Now, I have this picture of a house here. Even though a song is not necessarily a physical asset, it is intellectual property, which is an asset. So it's like a house that the songwriter and publishers own. As artists who may be covering or using excerpts from some of these copyrighted songs, it's not our house. The house does not belong to us. We have to ask permission to use a room or a particular part of the house for a specific project that we're working on. So in my opinion, I think it is the fair and just thing to do for the YouTube creators or artists who are tapping originally inspired work that has been copyrighted, that we should fulfill certain requirements if we're going to upload original material onto YouTube. For example, I would suggest 4 steps. 1, we must provide a link either in the video itself or below in the description box for viewers to purchase the original copyrighted song. I think that's fair. If I'm going to copy, let's say, David Bowie's Heroes, well then heck, I think it's only fair that I include a link somewhere for some of my viewers to purchase the David Bowie original. Step 2, we should begin or end the video with credits and state clearly, to give credit where it's due, that, for example, this song, as they do in the movies, you see the credits, we should have something in that format stating that, for example, this song was written by John Smith and Samantha Riley of the Super Hits Publishing Company, originally recorded by the Fleshtones on Warner Sisters Records, for example. Requirement 3, we must give up at least 50% of the ad revenues that we get from YouTube monetization to the songwriter and publisher. I think that's only fair and respectful. They're letting us use a room in their house for a specific purpose. They have a right to a significant part of the ad revs. Don't forget, you're getting the benefit of jumping on somebody's bandwagon for covering a famous song. That's great exposure that you didn't earn yourself. Let's be fair. And step 4, I think we must fill out a form stating whether copyrighted material is being used, in our opinion, in fair use policy. If we really believe that it's fair use, for whatever reason, we should state why on this form. I even made up a sample form that YouTube could refer to with this checklist form that we can fill out as YouTube uploaders. And at the bottom, we should sign it. It basically asks us to identify what copyrighted material we're using and for what purposes, briefly explain why you think it's fair use, and then sign it at the bottom. Type it in, hit submit. I think this would be a win-win-win solution for all parties involved, even WMG and UMG, for example. Let me just briefly summarize the benefits. First, songwriters and publishers would benefit from the extra publicity and exposure they're getting, the direct sales You know, if we're providing links underneath the video to purchase the original material, that's exposure and PR that they would never have gotten. And in many cases, these cover videos get tons and tons of views and have thousands of subscribers. Songwriters and publishers would also benefit from the monetization, the ad revenues from these videos. In the case of WMG and UMG, they're foregoing all of that. They're completely shutting down these videos of cover songs. YouTube creators would benefit from the extra monetization. You know, a little sliver here doesn't hurt. YouTube creators would benefit from the direct sales of their own downloads after having registered the mechanical licenses, that is. YouTube would benefit from the percentages it takes in the form of ad revenues. And finally, the big retail online stores like Amazon, iTunes, Google Music, and the membership sites like Spotify, Pandora would all benefit from the extra sales and subscriptions. All it takes is for YouTube to get together with WMG and UMG and some of these big publishing companies, as well as the pros, and bring everybody together. Have a big party. And they should be reminded of the billions of dollars that they're losing due to these copyright blocks that are inhibiting exposure and knowledge. I mean, let's face it, there are a number of songs out there that I would have never come across or discovered by listening to the original artist. But now you have sort of like a more stripped down version by a very talented up-and-coming indie artist doing cover songs, and you're totally flabbergasted by the performance, and you're like, wow, this is a great song. Why don't I check out the original while I'm at it also, and maybe buy a download of that as well? And finally, let's not forget to mention the amount of cultural literacy that's being stymied by some of these big publishing companies that are slapping these YouTube censorship blocks on these YouTube creators. Do we really want to live in a society that places constraints on artistic expression and punishes the cultivation of diversity, of thought, of musical expression, of culture, and opinion? Well, that's it for today. I know it's been a long one, but it is a deep and serious subject that affects a lot of independent artists up there. I hope you found it useful. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, as it'll help me and give me an incentive to do further videos like this. I'm also going to do more original music, and look out for that song with the excerpt from Genesis over the coming weeks. Thanks again. This is Ricky Molina, and I hope you have a great day.